Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and today we've got lots of great things to talk about because one, it's Halloween, and two, we've got a brand new Tony's Workshop to discuss. Now, as luck would have it, I was originally going to have a zombie-themed video for this week, but then a little undead birdie gave me a heads up about the new Tony's Workshop today, and the timing was perfect. So, I was able to tweak my content a little bit to supplement the spooky stuff that Marvel shared with us today, rather than conflict with it. Thanks as always to Marvel for getting things into my hands a little early so I can bring them to you just as soon as they're announced. So here's what you're going to get in today's video. A high-level review of the new Tony's Workshop, a deep dive into the new zombie rules, an alternate approach to making zombies, and then some more zombie-related things. And then I'll put out a separate video in the next few days, diving deep into the less spooky parts of today's workshop. Sound good? Then let's get into the details. For those who don't know, Tony's Workshop is the place where Marvel shares some new rules with us, usually before they wind up in a hardcover expansion. For example, the Getting Schooled rules were shared with us so we can playtest them and provide feedback before they showed up in the X-Men expansion. And recently, we had an opportunity to playtest the new Stunned rules before they showed up in the Avengers expansion. Marvel has given us a full month to provide feedback on these rules, and as you guys well know, they truly listen to and incorporate our feedback, so don't be bashful about sending it in. But you've got time, so actually try to use these rules in a game or two and then send your feedback. You can provide feedback at marvel.com/RPG and then click on Fax Submission and you'll see an option there for Tony's Workshop. This installment of Tony's Workshop is extra chunky for sure, with 3 major new rule sets. The first is a whole expansion to the combat system, not unlike how mental duels gave characters a new way to wipe the floor with each other. It's called Verbal Combat and includes new actions, reactions, and consequences for losing. If you've ever wondered how Squirrel Girl could have defeated Galactus in the comics, this was the way. The second major set of experimental rules was all about animals, including 4 new powers, a new origin, 6 animal profiles, and guidance on how to create your own animals. Feel free to share your initial reactions to the animal and the verbal combat rules, and let me know if you've got plans to playtest them. I would be happy to boost a signal on any efforts you guys have to get some folks together and play with the rules before sending your feedback in. Now, let's get to the Halloween-themed stuff and talk zombies. Last autumn seemed extra witchy with Agatha All Along and Wicked both coming out, but this Halloween season has been all zombies all the time. We had Marvel Zombies coming out on Disney+, a Marvel Zombies special event for Marvel Rivals, which is still running, by the way, for another couple of weeks, and the new Marvel Zombies Red Band comic. Issue 1 just came out last month, and it's pretty sick. And of course, we've got a Marvel Zombies one-shot adventure out by the guys at Action Dice TTG. And finally, we've got the second edition of a superhero game set in the zombie apocalypse, which is in the middle of a backer kit campaign right now, but more on that a little later. All said, this really is the perfect time to introduce us to some new zombie rules. And these rules are built on the foundation of the infection rules that we got in the X-Men expansion. So, if you get bit by a zombie, take at least 1 point of damage, and fail to make a target number 25 resilience check, you're infected. 25 is a very high number, and outside of the realm of possibilities for a lot of characters, but remember, any character can succeed on any roll they attempt with an ultimate fantastic success. So you're only like 99% screwed if you get bit by a zombie, and you're under rank 5 and don't have a maxed out resilience. This level of lethality is objectively very much in line with Marvel Zombies. If you get bit in those comics or in the TV show, you are a goner. The incubation period here is pretty swift, and the infection is resistant to even the healing power set. Every round you take a D Marvel times 3 damage, ignoring health reduction, so it really is just a matter of time until you succumb to this infection. And once you are killed by it, you are raised as a zombie, and you must constantly seek out living flesh to eat, or you take focus damage, eventually going mad in your quest to feed. Zombies retain their powers just like they do in the comics and the show. Ghost, for example, could still phase and turn invisible when she was a zombie. Hawkeye was still an expert marksman, and Okoye was still a great general. And we've also got a zombie henchman profile here that highlights the traits and the tags that a zombie has. Bloodthirsty, fearless, monster, signature attack teeth, and extreme appearance. This take of zombies is very much true to the show and the comics, which would be a lot of fun for a one-shot or a con game, but what if you want to incorporate zombie rules into your game in a slightly less lethal way? That's still fun and grounded in the comics and TV show. Well, I've got you covered. First off, let's establish that these homebrew rules I'm going to review with you are deliberately less deadly than the Tony's Workshop ones. It scratches a different itch, or bites a different face. Either way, this is intended to be complementary to these Tony's Workshop rules. In fact, you can even use both rules at the same time. I think the Marvel Zombies TV show did. The hero zombies, any of those zombies that had the red eyes, they're called Scions of the Queen of the Dead in the show, and they are brutal, much more powerful versions of the regular zombies because of Scarlet Witch or the Queen of the Dead, her influence. And my build approach here is going to be different. Instead of using an infection, we're going to be using an origin. Why an origin? Well, in Marvel Multiverse RPG, that is how all of the classic horror monsters are built, including werewolves and vampires, monsters that famously turn their victims into versions of themselves by biting them, not unlike zombies. Now, there aren't rules for how this happens with werewolves and vampires. The way I've personally ruled it in a game is that if a vampire kills you or if a werewolf almost does, the magic disease kicks in and you are turned into a version of that monster. But every narrator and player can set up these parameters themselves. The reason I like this is because if I'm running a game with vampires, werewolves, or zombies, I'm more interested in them as antagonists than having my characters inevitably turn into them. Of course, that should always be on the table, but I don't necessarily want it to happen, all the time. All right, so origins have traits and tags, so which ones are we looking at and why? Well, first off, Marvel zombies are dead. This is not as obvious a statement as you might think. Earlier this year, we got 28 years later, and in early 2026, we'll get 28 years later, the Bone Temple. In that franchise, the Rage virus is not the undead plague that it is in most other zombie stories. But in the rules of the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, they are dead, which means they get the deceased tag. Marvel zombies, being undead, are pretty messed up to look at, and they gain this appearance as soon as they become undead. It's pretty obvious when the zombie turns. The creatures don't have to naturally rot over time before you know what you're dealing with. They instantly look like a zombie. So let's give them the extreme appearance tag. Another thing about Marvel zombies is damage that would normally kill a regular human may not have as great an effect on them. They don't need all of their organs, for example. We see zombie Captain America get sliced in half and keep on coming. How can you represent this? The idea that they don't get knocked out of the fight until they're destroyed. I think a simple way of doing that without creating new rules or increasing stats is to just ignore the unconscious and demoralized conditions. Zombie Cap also didn't bleed out despite being sliced in two, so we can give him immunity to bleeding as well. And I think Bloodthirsty makes a ton of sense. If you're fighting a zombie and it knocks you unconscious, it's not going to move on to the next enemy to try and attack them. It's going to see a meal lying there and it's going to try and eat you. And that's it. I like this approach because it's a really simple and easy thing to implement, and it leaves the rules for turning into a zombie up to each table, just like it currently is for werewolves and vampires. We don't need to give the zombie the infector trait if we go this route, because the vampire or werewolf doesn't have it. The language at the top here is borrowed from the vampire origin, which states, the character was once alive but was embraced by a vampire and has risen from death as a vampire too. They can transmit this magical disease to victims of their choosing. And that's the only rule we've got for transmitting this disease before the X-Men expansion. So it's very open-ended and rules light. Now there's one more thing we can talk about, like how in the Marvel Zombies TV show, the zombie disease can actually be stopped. Shang-Chi's infection, for example, is held at bay thanks to the power of the 10 rings, kind of clamped on his arm there. Now there are a couple of ways you can translate this into game rules, and I want to acknowledge that I 100% got these ideas from a great source of inspiration if you're running a zombie game, the Rotted Capes TTRPG. And luckily, at the time of this video's release, this game is right in the middle of a backer kit campaign to fund a second edition, Rotted Cape's Second Bite. It is a superhero game based in the aftermath of a zombie apocalypse, and there's a lot of really good ideas there that you can mine for your own Marvel Multiverse role-playing game. One concept from Rotted Capes that I love is the idea of cauterizing a wound with fire immediately after being bitten by a zombie to stop that disease before it takes root. To translate this into MMRPG, I've created the following reaction: cauterize. The character must have either an elemental firepower or something like a road flare or a butane torch at the ready to cauterize the wound with a TN10 logic check, just like you would to stop bleeding. This cauterization, however, does the same amount of damage that the original bite did, just to make sure you get it all. Mechanically and thematically, this is going to have a real impact on your combats because characters are going to want to save up their reactions when fighting zombies. That means you're going to have fewer help teammate attempts, fewer dodges and rams and fastball special attempts, and therefore tougher combats in which the characters must always think defensively. Then if you're fresh out of road flares and Pyro and Johnny Storm have already been zombified, you can always try a more drastic reaction: amputate. If you're within reach of an ally, you're wielding a bladed weapon, and your ally is willing, you can automatically remove a limb to keep your ally from being zombified. Another bit of advice from Rotted Capes is how you can keep encounters fresh when your whole campaign is based around zombies being the enemy. This advice is also great if you're running a vampire-themed campaign or really any other type of themed campaign where you're fighting one type of monster, and that is to assign each enemy a unique combat role. And I think the Marvel Zombies show does a really good job of this. The Rotted Capes roles are Striker, which relies on speed, precision, and aggression at close range. I think Wasp and Ant-Man when they're small, and Captain America scooting around on his arms. Those are pretty good examples of this from the show. Bruiser, obviously a heavy hitter and a damage sponge. Abomination and Thor are great examples. A ranged combatant that keeps their distance and harasses from afar. Hawkeye for sure. A controller that disrupts the hero's plans. This is a little tougher to find in the show, but I think Wasp or Ant-Man when they were big did that. A lurker that is stealthy and opportunistic. That's Ghost. A horde leader that inspires and directs minions, Okoye for sure, and a solo boss. It could be either Namor and then of course the big solo boss at the end, the Scarlet Witch. Ultimately, one of the strengths of Marvel Zombies as a show is that it has a diverse group of zombies for the main characters to defeat, and these guidelines are a great way to ensure that you're doing that in your home game. So do yourselves a favor and check out Rotted Cape's Second Bite at BackerKit. The link is in the description. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I just think this game is great either as a standalone game or as the inspiration that you need to take your Marvel Multiverse zombie game to the next level. The BackerKit for the second edition ends soon, so don't delay in checking that out if you're interested. That's all I've got for you guys today. Remember, the next video we're going to cover the second half of the Tony's Workshop, the animal control rules, and the verbal combat rules. If you've got any questions about those, reach out to me as soon as you can, and I'll see if I can squeeze that in before I put the video out. As always, I hope you guys have a great day, enjoy your Halloween, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.